Call the meeting to order. Before I get started, I'd just like to say we do have regrets from the Deputy Warden. He's unable to attend today. First, I would like to start off with, I'd like to begin with acknowledging that we're Mi'kma'ki in the district of Spaganagity, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. East Hants further acknowledges the 50 African Nova Scotian communities whose 400-year history have contributed to the province's history, culture, and legacy. We are all treaty people. First, I'll be looking now for the approval or amendments to the agenda of all subcommittees. Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Be looking for the approval of the minutes of June 18th, 2024. Moved by Councillor Mitchell, seconded by Councillor McPhee. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carried. We'll now move on to new employee introductions, and who will be taking those on? CAO. Go ahead, CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a whole, for those of you who can't see, we have a whole room full of staff for our employee recognitions and introductions today. The first employee that has joined us over the last few weeks is Hannah Grosvenor. Hannah came to us from an architectural firm, and she is going to be the administrative assistant for the planning and development and recreation folks. So we're very excited to have her join the team up there. And she also has a very creative side to her, so that's always welcome here. It sort of translates well into what we do for the municipality as well. So welcome, Hannah. The next two folks are joining our INO team. The first one is Jared Mullett. Jared is our new project engineer, so we'll be working on a lot of our capital projects. He joins the team from the private sector again, and he's also a fellow UNB grad, so he deserves an extra round of applause. Just saying, you know. Next on our list, we've got a whole slate this month, is Sean Harris. Sean is joining us as a new position in INO for an environmental engineering technician, joining Chelsea and doing the work. This work primarily relates to making sure we're compliant with all of our environmental regulations, doing our source water protection, all of those types of things. So very excited to have some extra hands in that part of our operations. And yeah, just want to welcome Sean, and Sean's in the field today. He's sampling today, which is exactly where he needs to be. And last but not least, we also have Calvin Byer joining our team. Calvin is the new manager of protective services for East Hants. It's a new role that we have here. Calvin comes to us from the RCMP world and is going to be an absolutely phenomenal addition to our team with respect to the EMO side of what we do. And he's also going to be the primary liaison between us and the RCMP, us and the fire service, and SHREW and folks like that. So very warm welcome to Calvin, and welcome to the team. So Mr. Chairman, sorry, a little promotion there. Those are the four new adds to the team this month. Our HR folks have been extremely busy getting 4 new full-time folks onboarded, and I hope each one of them has a long, wonderful career with East Hants.
Thank you, CAO. Yes, and welcome everybody to some faces that are familiar and some faces that are new. The warden would like to say something. Go ahead, warden.
I was just going to add, on behalf of council, a welcome to everyone that's new. I feel like to Calvin, we should almost say welcome back or something. And very happy to have you all with us, and thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, warden. Now we're going to get on to the next part, which those who are just joining us can look forward to a few years from now. We're going to go on with some employee recognitions. And I will pass it on to the warden.
stand here and I'm gonna talk loud. I've never been accused of not being loud enough. Ben Brown was not able to be here today, so he'll get his recognition at a later date. So to start off with, our first recognition is Dave White, 5 years. As Building and Grounds lead hand for the past 5 years, David White is a valued member of the Parks, Recreation, and Culture team. He keeps the parks maintenance crew organized and efficient, maintains the municipal buildings in odor-lying regions, and has even assisted with pool operations. Dave works incredibly hard to keep municipal walkways, docks, and playgrounds safe as inspections, repairs, and maintenance has become a year-round function as park use continues to increase. We appreciate that Dave has been a crucial component in the parks inspection program and is always willing to lend a hand to fellow employees and to the public. Dave holds a number of certifications that support the team, including WMIS, Emergency First Aid, Confined Space, Forklift, Fall Protection, Chainsaw Safety, Playground Safety, and Pool Operator. And I'm pretty sure he could drive a snowplow if he had to.
Sooner not.
Raised in Rod and Gold Mines and now residing in Kennecott with his wife and 2 daughters, Dave can be found working on his property, driving his side-by-side, or taking his girls to sport or other activities. Please join us in celebrating 5 years of valuable service to the community. Congratulations, Dave. I'll just add, I've known this guy since before he can remember. So we're lucky to have him.
Thank you.
Next, we celebrate 15 years of service for Amanda Hatfield. And in reading the bio that goes for this, there was something missed, so I'm going to say at the outset that she bakes lovely cakes, and anyone who's ever sat on fire advisory knows this. Amanda Hatfield joined our municipality in 2009, bringing with her a wealth of experience from the Association of Municipal Administrators of Nova Scotia, AMANS, a Bachelor of Arts degree from St. Mary's University, and a paralegal diploma from Success Business College. Amanda's journey with us began as an administrative assistant to the Director of Administration. In 2013, she transitioned to the role of Administrative Services Clerk in the Finance Department. A year later, she moved on to become the Administrative Support Clerk in the CAO's office. Since 2016, Amanda has excelled as our Information Management Coordinator. Throughout her tenure, Amanda has been an active participant on numerous committees, including the Social Committee, Health and Wellness Committee, AMA Records Management Committee, Innovation Working Group, Support for Council's Fire Advisory Committee, Brand Standards Committee, with a focus on accessibility, and most recently, the Service Excellence Committee. In her current role, Amanda continues to enhance our information records management systems and processes, significantly benefiting East Hants. Her business analysis training, combined with her gold certification as a Laserfiche professional, document scanning and records disposition process oversight, impacts tens of thousands of municipal files each year, ensuring that information is both protected and accessible for those who need it to serve the public, and that liability is limited. She has been a key resource in increasing staff efficiencies through process documentation and the digitization of forms. Amanda, your contribution over the past 15 years have been invaluable. Your commitment, expertise, and dedication have made a lasting impact on our organization. We are incredibly fortunate to have you on our team. So please join us in celebrating 15 years of service. Congratulations, Amanda.
Okay.
And lastly, but certainly not least, this morning, we recognize 15 years of service for Kelly Ash. Kelly Ash joined our team in June 2009 as a planning and development technician, where she was responsible for processing subdivision applications and issuing new civic addresses and responding to countless public inquiries for zoning information and mapping. Not having worked in a municipal environment previously, this was a great opportunity for Kelly to learn, and learn she did. Early on, it became apparent that Kelly was a quick learner, had a great work ethic, and a positive attitude when working with staff and members of the public, which were precisely the qualities needed when she transitioned to her role of development officer in 2012. Kelly quickly became the go-to resource for helping property owners, developers, surveyors, and builders navigate the myriad policies and regulations related to subdivision and land use. In 2014, her title was changed to Manager of Development Services to recognize and reflect her expanding duties in development control, including responsibility for the building inspection, fire inspection, and bylaw enforcement functions. Kelly is currently transitioning the East Hants Emergency Management Coordinator duties to our Manager of Protective Services, which makes it a great opportunity to recognize her achievements in carrying us through a global pandemic, numerous floods, major snow events, and several hurricanes. Like everything, Kelly threw herself into this role with intellect, passion, and an innate ability to connect with people. It has been a very busy 15 years for Kelly, and we're grateful to have her on our team supporting the ever-expanding development industry in East Hants. Please join us in celebrating 15 years of valuable service to the community. Congratulations. Other things.
Congratulations to all the recipients today of employee recognitions in the service. And I will echo what the warden said. When I first came on council, the first committee meeting I went to was a fire advisory meeting, and I got to partake in a nice piece of cake, and I said, geez, this is going to be a great job. This happens at all the meetings. But no, well done for everybody, and hope to see you all collect subsequent awards in the future years as well. Nobody go anywhere. Thank you.
The virtual cake's just not the same.
No. All right, moving on. Amy's going to come forward, and we'll look at management of real property policy. I'll let you get set up, and we'll go from there.
That's not my screen, is it? Yeah, but that's not my screen. Okay. I thought my depth perception was off because I'm zoomed in more than that, and I thought, gotta get my eyes checked. Wonderful. Right, so through the chair, good morning. And as we continue to see an increase in real estate files, as you've heard from me many a times over the last few years, not quite 5 yet. We'll see you next year in that celebration. But as we've continued to see an increase in our real estate files, staff felt that it was time for us to have a conversation around a larger governance framework for the service area of real estate. So in front of you today is that first policy that we are proposing. It's entitled the Management of Real Property Policy. And the intent here is to have a general policy that kind of documents the philosophies around how East Hants will carry out our real property management services, both how we manage our inventory and also the related transactions around that, and generally just to document our commitment to a real property management program. So when I say governance framework, the goal here is really to ensure that we have the necessary policies, strategies, processes, templates, all that good stuff, have it all in place to ensure a consistent, fair, and transparent approach to how we manage real estate and real property assets. Now, this doesn't mean that these things aren't happening already. This is really just about making sure we document our standards and really bring everything together and formalize the service area. So you may be connecting the dots here. This is a similar approach to the logic and structure that we did through the asset management program as well. And we want to ensure that real property as a municipal asset is being managed in a responsible manner throughout its life cycle. You'll see lots of definitions in the proposed policy that's attached to your agenda today. The intention there is really just to ensure that we have a common understanding and consistency with the terminology that we are using within our real property management program. So real property itself, it's defined as all land and improvements that are permanently affixed to that land, so on, above, or below. And essentially it's what we own, what we manage, and what we have rights to. So the proposed policy itself, it outlines 4 purposes, and again, you're probably going to notice some similarities to our November 2022 asset management policy. So what we're looking at is our commitment to best practice, ensuring all stages of a property's life support municipal objectives. We're limiting our exposure to liability by having standards on how we manage our properties and our inventory. And we're looking at authorizing the CAO to establish and manage a corporate real property management program. So the policy is broken into 2 sections. We've got real property management and real property transactions. And to highlight some of the policy statements here in the staff report, again, we're stating our commitment to maintaining a real property management inventory. And I'd just like to take an opportunity to note the great work that Jillian and Tippy and our summer student Matt are doing on our inventory work. And you'll start to see a lot of that filtering through various conversations we have at the council level in the upcoming months. So lots of cool stuff is happening there on the GIS front. And so I just want to take an opportunity to highlight that. And it really shows that connection of our asset management and our real estate service areas. This policy also brings together the various policies and legislation that we must follow. So transactions are in compliance with the MGA, and unless authorized under the CAO policy, all transactions still require the approval of council. So we're not trying to extend or skirt any of our existing authorities. What we're trying to do here is just reiterate and have transparency around what it is that we do follow. Transactions are to be conducted on a fair market value, so unless otherwise approved by council as permitted under the MGA, where examples like that would include our disposals to nonprofit groups, and we would follow a public hearing process still under that as well. And the last point I've highlighted in the staff report is that transactions are to demonstrate the appropriate due diligence, so that's title, financial, and physical environmental condition due diligence as well. So I will note that staff do have intentions of bringing forward an update to council's disposal of surplus property policy as well. That will be later this year, so stay tuned on that one. And again, this is just to show our commitment to how East Hants manages our real property and how we move our real property transactions forward. So I'll bring the notice or the motion up on the screen here, and it is for a notice of intent to approve the policy. And I'll turn it back to the chair for any questions or discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Committee, you have the motion in front of you. Is there any discussion, and what's your wishes? Councilor Tingley.
Good report. I'll move that Corporate and Residential Services Committee recommends to council that council give notice of intent to approve the management of real property policy as attached in the Executive Committee agenda dated July 16th, 2024.
Seconded by Councilor McPhee. Any discussion? Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. All the votes are in, and it's passed unanimously. Thank you. Our next topic is going to be the municipal fee policy, and Noah and Leanne are going to take that. Nathan, sorry. Why do I say that? Sorry. I'm sorry about that, Nathan. And once you guys get set up, when you're ready, you can take off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, through you to committee. So today we'll be bringing an update to the municipal fee policy. Essentially, the current version of the this policy is being reviewed for several reasons as part of the regular policy review program. as part of the planning department's regular fee review process, as well as a requirement of the Municipal Housing Accelerator Fund agreement. So all of the aspects of this review are being brought forward as part of this one policy. The current version of the policy outlines the rates the planning department and the finance department use to charge for certain fees. It is primarily a planning document, however, with only a few finance ones in there. This policy was created in 2017 and has not been updated since then. Planning did bring forward a review of this policy in 2018 to change the fees, but committee chose not to accept those updates. As part of this review, staff conducted a jurisdictional scan of planning and development fees for 6 other units across Nova Scotia, attached as Appendix A for your review. It found that we have similar fees to some municipalities in certain areas and more expensive than others, but we are generally lower in comparison, especially to HRM. As part of this review, staff also met with the CAO, representatives of finance, planning, corporate services, and parks and recreation and culture to bring all the fees into one document. And finally, to satisfy the requirements of the Housing Accelerator Fund agreement, planning staff conducted an internal review of our fees and sent it out to developers for their consultation and feedback as part of it. So after this review, staff are proposing amendments to both planning and building permit fees, which we'll discuss coming up. There are 5 main categories of updates staff are recommending today. The first is just small template and wording changes, bringing everything in line with our current policy best practices. Next are planning and development fees, which Leanne will speak to.
Maybe to the policy. All right. So for the planning and development review, there are a number of planning and development fees that are proposed to increase that you can see on the screen there. So this is in order to keep pace with inflation, as well as the increased cost of construction, as well as correcting some of the discrepancies and unfairness that is found in the current fee policy. So some of the significant changes are for the building permit fees. In most of the cases, the permit fee costs are proposed to slightly increase, except permit fees for some smaller sheds, which will be reduced, and the fees for the cost of commercial renovations. So right now, under our current fee schedule, the cost for a commercial renovation, as it's based on the cost of construction, ends up actually being more than the cost of a new permit for a commercial or industrial building. So we are proposing to change that number to a per square footage fee as opposed to a per cost of construction fee. As well, we are proposing to change the fee for your typical building permit, so for a single-family dwelling, to increase by 5 cents a square foot. Sheds and garages are proposed to change by lowering the administration fee from $75 to $50, while increasing the square footage fee by 6 cents. So this change will slightly decrease the permit fees for smaller accessory buildings and increase for larger accessory buildings. So the proposed fees, as you can see on the screen, there is in the appendix some data that shows what the current fee we charge versus what the proposed fees would be and what the difference in the cost would be. The most significant would be for commercial and industrial renovations. That would be the biggest change. So those are our proposed changes for planning and development. I'll pass it back to you.
Our third update we're proposing for our committee is the addition of all other municipal fees into this document. So the vision for the municipal fee policy is to really include all fees charged by the municipality, not just the planning and development ones. So we can see the addition of several new fees, or not new fees, several existing fees that are just being rolled into this policy. So it's sort of a one-stop shop for all applicable fees. Staff are also proposing the removal of a defunct fee, which is in relation to the dog bylaw. The municipality no longer impounds dogs directly, so we are proposing to remove that fee. Our fifth update will be the creation of a new fee, which would be the information access fee. So this would generally be in regards to FOIPOP requests. They represent a significant staff time draw, researching, collating all the data necessary. And so this would be a bit of a cost recovery method for that. The actual fee we are allowed to prescribe is written out in the FOIPOP legislation provided by the province. So that fee is currently, the first 2 hours are free with a $15 charge per half hour rounded down to the nearest half hour. And to initiate a FOIPOP request has an initial charge of $5 mandated by the province. There's also a copy charge fee included in here, 15 cents per page, also mandated by the province, should we choose to do a fee. Jumping back to the staff report now. As an alternative to this fee, or to the draft policy, committee may choose to recommend that we accept some of these changes while rejecting others, or they may choose to amend the fees as they see fit. Staff currently recommend that committee recommend to council to update the draft version of the municipal fee policy as presented. There's a draft motion for your consideration. We'd be happy to answer any questions, and back to the chair.
Thank you. First up to speak, the warden.
Thank you. I just took notice here that $10 per $1,000 of construction value on commercial renovation, for example. And when I look at the jurisdictional scan, we're way higher than anybody else. Is there a particular reason for that?
Who's taking that one? John, okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it was just direction in the past from council to make sure development helps pay for itself. So it was an attempt for cost recovery. I don't think anymore that building inspection fees cover even 50% of the cost of the service, but still, there's an attempt there to do cost recovery, some cost recovery.
I guess, okay, I was just curious. It just struck me as odd that you were even higher than HRM.
Is that it, warden? Thank you. Next up to speak, Councillor Musa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I remember something now. I received a complaint few months back about a fee for having a statement that your taxes are paid. How much we charge for that? Like it was something like if your bank want proof that your taxes are paid, and you come to the municipality to get that paper. Somebody told me it was about $50, $60. Is that true?
Yes, I believe in the chart it said $60 for a tax certificate. Pardon? Yeah.
So to get the paper from the municipality costs $60.
For certified, if it's non-certified, it's $10. The CAO has informed me.
Thank you.
Director of Finance.
Yes, just confirming what you just said, Mr. Chair. When legal firms or mortgage companies request those fees, it's $60. If an individual is just requesting a copy, they come into the office and they get a copy, it's a $10 fee. And actually, part of the fee the changes that are incorporated into this document that we're looking at is when you look at the specifics under the Finance Department, it refers to as per the CAO policy in respect of those fees for residents that come in and want their statement. So that would give the CAO the ability to waive those fees, those $10 fees. And the CAO and I have actually discussed that, and we very much want to proceed with a policy, if it's approved by council here as it's being presented, that we would then, in turn, take this policy and draft our own CAO policy in respect to those $10 fees, that we would waive them for people that are coming in on a, first-time basis requesting their statements. But of course, if you get a person that's continually coming in, we would look at that after that, if they're repeatedly asking for multiple copies, we would look at it that's what our discussions have been so far. So that has been a discussion, and we hope that via these changes, we can institute that waiving of that $10 fee in the future. Thank you.
Does that satisfy you, Councillor Musa?
Thank you.
Next up to speak, Councillor Tingley.
Having listened to the report and the answers given by staff, I think it's a well-researched report and a good policy. So I'm going to move that the Corporate and Residential Services Committee recommends to council that council give notice of intent to approve the municipal fee policy as attached to the Executive Committee agenda dated July 16th, 2024.
Moved and seconded. There's two people on to speak before. First up, the warden.
Yes, thank you. Just back to the $10 fee, and we had significant discussion on this issue a few years ago. And it's just, many people pay their taxes online these days, and they don't have a receipt if they need to show somehow that they've paid their taxes. And at the time, I felt very strongly that no resident of East Hants should be charged $10 to come in and get a receipt for having paid their taxes. And I assume this is where we landed as a compromise. I don't really remember, but I'm very happy to hear it is being waived, because I'm just going the record as saying I don't support charging residents who have paid their taxes online or whatever a fee for getting a copy of a receipt. And until such time as technology allows for online payments to receive receipts, I guess that's where we're at. So thank you.
Thank you, Warden. And I'm going to turn the chair over to you because I have a couple questions too before the motion. Go along with the same thing with the Warden. Yeah, like we don't issue receipts as part of anybody paying online, and especially during the pandemic and a lot of those times we actually were encouraging people to pay online to remain out of the offices. And for those who live in the more rural and farther parts of the municipality, driving in here is a cost of between $10 and $60 in fuel to come back and forth, depending upon where you're coming from. So I'm glad to hear that if this policy passes, that there might be a follow-up policy to help with residents who need those initial receipts, not as a certified copy that would be required for doing something else. The one thing that I'm looking at, and the warden brought it up, and is our fees are in comparison to our neighbors of similar size, and looking at West Hants, Cumberland County, and those our fees are in some areas drastically higher, in some areas lower. As part of the Housing Accelerator Fund, it was my understanding that we're trying to make it easier and more accessible for housing to be built. I understand the commercial rates, and looking at the overall chart that was in the presentation, it looks like a couple of the commercial rates are going to be severely reduced. For commercial industrial renovation, they're going to see a savings of over $5,000 per application. The commercial the other one is going to see $800. But when we look at single-unit dwellings and accessory buildings, which I believe does the accessory building include the garden suite, garden home permits? Those are waived right now. Okay, yeah. So if somebody was building a garage with that in it, they would not require to get a permit? Because if the top floor of the garage was going to be the accessory dwelling, would the bottom floor be required to have a permit for the garage underneath? That's the question. Oh,
Sorry,
oops, I clicked on the wrong one. Go ahead. I turned on.
forgot I was in the chairs. Go ahead, John.
Through you, Madam Warden. Yeah, she would still be required to have a permit. So if the bottom is just a garage and the upper floor is an accessory dwelling unit, we would waive the fee for that upper, whatever fees are related to the upper portion, but you would still have to pay for a garage permit, I guess.
Okay. Because I'm just looking at, if we're trying to spur development, increasing our fees for residential, to me seems kind of counterintuitive to that process. I do get inflation. I do get how much time and effort, especially when we're looking at all the number of inspections that come along with these permits, the number of kilometers our inspectors have to drive, the cost of fuel and everything else. I get that some cost recovery has to be part of that. I was just wondering, has that been looked at as part of this policy change with respect to increasing in the residential side and we're decreasing in the commercial side?
Through you, Madam Warden, we did, that was discussed. I mean, there wasn't any great analysis on it, I would say, but it was discussed. And the commercial stuff, there's just such a huge inequity there that we felt needed to be addressed. That's why that's in here. And we don't think, where you do see these increases on the residential side, that they're material enough that, somebody would not build a house. That, again, and I don't think we are actually keeping up with inflation, but we're getting a little bit closer.
Okay, no, it's something to look forward, look at the future, especially, instead of just having a flat fee for construction permit, once you start putting square footage on things, it's almost like if you're going to build a bigger house, you got to pay more for your permit. A building permit, to me, should be a building permit no matter how big you build it. But that's all I have to say for now. Thank you, Warden.
Any further discussion on the motion? Question's been called. And the motion is passed unanimously. I will turn the chair back over to you, sir.
Thank you, Warden. Thank you for the presentation. Next up, CAO Authority Policy. I'll pass it over to the CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councilors, you have as part of your repertoire of policies a CAO authority policy, which basically takes the allowances under the MGA and identifies for me where you give me authority that is granted through legislation. If it says that council may set by policy the authority for the CAO, this policy is basically where that all gets captured. As time goes on, there's incidences that happen that, either I go look to the policy and look for where my authority lies and it's gray, or the recent changes to the MGA have actually added more areas where council can choose to give the CAO authority or not. So this report Nathan put together for me, identifying areas of sort of that gray area. We kind of keep track of them and we'll put them in front of you today for consideration. So there are some template changes, again, keeping up with our municipal policy updates. Usually when you see a new policy, it's got some template changes to it. The first one that the recent MGA changes have provided is to allow the authority of the CAO to discharge completed development agreements, either in part or in whole. And when this would happen, those at this point have to come to council. And quite often they're They're administrative in nature, and we do bring them to council for consideration, but the MGA now allows the CAOs to approve them. When you would discharge a development agreement would be for things like if the development agreement's never been actioned, if the terms of the development agreement have ended, or the most often that we see is where the current zoning doesn't require the development agreement to be in place anymore. So if the development agreement was to build a 3-story building where it was only permitted to build 2 at the time, but now that current zoning allows for a 3-story building, then that development agreement no longer needs to be in place. So it can, people can come in and ask for it to be discharged. Excuse me. So the changes to the policy would allow me to do those discharges, and, you know, anything that was not within the MGA authority would have to come back to council. The other one that we often get into discussions with at the staff level is around signing authority for easements. Right now it just says I have authority to sign for easements. And I'm just looking for a little bit more clarity as to what that actually means to make sure that council and the CAO are on the same page. So essentially, the first 2 are sort of standard easements where we take or release easements or grant or release easements. The third one is when an easement has to be granted or is going to be granted over municipal property that could encumber the future of that municipal property. Council really should be approving those easements. So in that case, this policy would give me clear direction that no, I can't approve an easement unless you've already approved it. I can sign the easement once you've approved it, but not granting it. And that just prevents the CAO from encumbering future municipal property without council's awareness, because you wouldn't want that to happen. There's also, recently, we've had some back and forth with the Department of Justice around the power to appoint officers for enforcement for the municipality. So we just want to make it clear by putting it in the policy that the CAO has that authority. So for example, municipal compliance officers for the SPCA would be a good example of where the CAO would historically have appointed those officers through this policy and through the MGA. And then the last one with the taking over operations of the Sportsplex, the policy already included a section where the CAO has authority to set the pool rates at the Aquatic Center. This adds into that, that the CAO has authority to set the rates at the East Hants Sportsplex, with the exception of the big ones, so the ice pad and field house rentals. I think eventually we can get there, but right now I don't think the CAO should have authority to set those, because with the pressure of the community on that building, I think that needs to remain a council decision. But this policy would enable the CAO to set things like cafe prices for hot dogs and hamburgers and room rentals and things like that. It also gives the authority to the CAO to negotiate rates for large or special events. And I want to be clear that that's not for things like the request you had last month from the Tide Fest folks. It would be for things like somebody who wants to come in and rent the entire complex for the weekend. There might be additional cleaning fees required. There might be time when they need the rooms to have their stuff set in but aren't using it. So maybe you negotiate a little bit of that in there. Standard contract negotiations for an event like that, this would enable, but giving a nonprofit group 3 or 4 hours or half the rental price or things like that, it wouldn't enable. So where council has decided otherwise. So those are the proposed changes. Council can, based on your conversation, or committee can, based on your conversation today, make a recommendation to council of all or part of. And I would open the floor to questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, CAO. After hearing the report on the policy from the CAO, opening the floor for questions. What are your wishes? Counselor Mitchell.
Yes, I'll move that Corporate and Residential Services Committee recommends to council, the council give notice of intent to approve the CAO's authority policy as attached to the executive committee agenda dated today, July 16th, 2024.
Seconded by Counselor McPhee. Is there any further discussion?
Question?
Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. The vote is passed by a vote of 8-1, with Counselor Rhino voting nay. I guess we've now reached our break time. So I guess we'll take our break, our 10-minute break early, or make it a 15-minute break early. We'll come back at 5 after 10. That'll give us 17 minutes instead of 15. All those in favor? Okay. We're back at 5 after 10. We're good to go? All right. So, welcome back from the break. Next up on the agenda is the 2023-2024 East Hants Annual Report, and that'll be taken by the CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is with great pleasure that I bring you the 2023-2024 annual report for East Hants this year. The report takes you through all of the initiatives that have happened with the municipality this year. It ties them back to your strategic plan. It also gives you some sort of statistics around operations and in some departments, sort of short overviews of what's been accomplished throughout the year. And it closes out with the treasurer's report that you folks have seen the financial statements already and approved those. And the treasurer's report is basically as layman as we can get, describing the consolidated financial statements and the reports that you approve through the financial statements, because consolidated financial statements are not the easiest thing in the world to read, surprisingly. So the treasurer's report sort of breaks that down for you into terms we hope you can understand. So this document will be posted on our municipal website and will be available for residents, investors, anyone else who wants to have a look at what East Hants has been up to from over the past fiscal year. I'm going to skip through a number of the first pages of the report, sort of about East Hants for folks who are reading this report that don't know us as a municipality or as a region. There's a blurb there explaining us. Your mission and vision for your strategic plan is here with some statistics about how we're growing and our population. And again, you're going to see with the new council, a new strategic plan and a renewed vision and mission for next year's annual report. This one's been in place for 4 years, and I think it's served this council very well. There is a message in here from the warden where she highlights some of the changes through your council seats over the last number of years, some significant grant funding that we've received. She also acknowledged in her message the tragedies from July 2023 for our neighboring municipalities who had loss of life during the storm, and also the work that's being done on the East Hants Aquatic Center, which has just opened up this past week. Keeping in mind this report sort of is the situation for the municipality as at March 31st. So sometimes, you know, in July, it's a little strange telling about things that have already opened or already happened. But this report takes us up to the end of March. There's a message in here from the CAO talking about the accomplishments more from a capital project point of view, planning points of view, work that we've done with staff this year, and just talking about how incredibly proud I am as Chief Administrative Officer to lead the team that we have and to work with the council that we have. So the first section is around municipal governance. Each of you have your pictures prominently displayed on this page. This section talks about the work that council has done over the last year with reviewing your policies. There's a list of policies there that we've been getting through this past year, which is great. You did a couple of them again this morning. So that kind of work is really important. And I think the investment that council has made in this community over the last year is extremely notable. And this report really shows the decisions that you've made through that legislative process and the true impact it has on our community. You know, we have a lot of challenges in this community, and every time this council deals with an issue, you deal with it head on. And you have invested, you'll see throughout the report, the investments you've made in the community are fairly significant and really meaningful, which is the more important part. Investments that you've made in our municipal staff are notable. We sit now at 89 full-time equivalent positions. Compared to a few years ago, I think 2021, our average age was 45. We're down to 42. And in 2021, about 37% of our employees were 50 years old or older, and now we're sitting at about 28%. So we have had several retirements over the last number of years, and we're replacing those folks, and those ages are coming down. So as far as your strategic plan goes, you do have 4 key strategies. Look at infrastructure, our corporate excellence, which is really how we operate internally with the municipality. You look at the strong community that you're looking at building, and then we look at economic prosperity, so making sure that we have the business connections in our community to help us grow and to be sustainable. I'm going to take you through each one of these. The report outlines a number of initiatives that have been done under each one of the key objectives to reach your strategic goals. I'm not going to read the entire report, but I do want to point out a few sort of bigger pieces throughout each one. So under your sustainable infrastructure, we have finished the service capacity study. Council will see that report come in September of this year to council, but primarily the work that was done was over the last 18 months. That study is really going to set you up to plan for your future as far as your wastewater and your water management go. We've done a lot of work. Amy was here this morning talking about a real estate management policy. We have had an incredible amount of real estate transactions over the last year. Some primary ones that we looked at, we purchased some land for expansion of the Elmsdale Business Park. We purchased 90 acres along Grand Lake for future water infrastructure needs. In Lakelands, we also had a deal to acquire 14 acres of parkland, and you'll see throughout this report and in this year, we'll be putting a playground on Charles Drive in Mount Uniacke over the next little while. Fall or spring. And then you're looking at, we did transfer 3 of our surplus properties to not-for-profit groups over the last year. So, those are all sort of dots on a page, but the work that goes into making that happen and following all the legislative requirements of being able to dispose of a surplus property is quite incredible. So a lot of work on your real estate side as well as your asset management side. Some of the asset management bullets on the page are a little bit granular for a report like this, but I think it's important because the program is so new and we're really making great strides in asset management. And I think the investment that council is making is starting to show up in us being able to provide you with better information to make your decisions. So, an incredible amount of work as we start to bring that program into play. And this sustainable infrastructure, you can't talk about this without talking about the actual work that you've done on increasing the connectivity in your neighborhoods, on your sewer and water treatment plants. So many things that, massive projects for us, the wastewater treatment plant in Shubenacadie is online now. Last year, that consumed quite a bit of our time in engineering, for example. You did the road gap paving program. So, once it's approved, it's work that we have done at the staff level. But even getting to that road gap paving were several staff reports and making sure that you were making the right decisions for the community. So you'll see the active transportation work that's being done around this area in particular in Elmsdale has been significant with the construction of an active transportation route on the 214, fixing up some of the sidewalk areas on the number 2 and 214 where they connected, as well as working on the contract to have that connection between the bridge coming over the 9 Mile River from Lance up to the Highway 214 sidewalks. That work hasn't been done yet, but council has already made the decision funded the project, and that'll be happening when that development happens. So work like that is often undertaken by council, but you don't always see the benefits right away. You put quite a bit of work in getting those contracts negotiated and whatnot, and then it might take a year for you to actually see the work to be done. But all of that pre-work is really important, because without making those decisions, it wouldn't have happened. Another example of that is the work on the Mount Uniacke streetlights. So the council has approved 200 plus lights to go in Mount Uniacke. That work will be taking place over the next, in this fiscal. On our infrastructure, the Lance Water Tower was a massive project, a major refurbishment this year. I mentioned the wastewater treatment plant, and the other big project that really is going to set us up for the future is the expansion of the tank in Enfield water treatment plant. So when council built that in 2008, they built it with room to expand, and that expansion has now taken place to increase that water capacity. Under corporate excellence, this is really talking about the way that we provide service to the community. We being staff primarily, but also council's directives to us to provide services to the community. So we have the first part of this, talking about the financial framework. Council did a lot of work this year on your budgeting framework around the detransfer tax revenue, your reserve policies, your growth management grants that you established for growing areas and for the rural fire departments. That work was all done for the 24-25 fiscal year, but it was done in the fiscal year that we're reviewing. So that can't go undiscussed. We also have done a lot of risk management work this year at the staff level. I'm not going to read all of the things that we've done, but just wanted to highlight that the risk management really is something that we are paying attention to. And quite often it's working its way into some of the policies and whatnot that council sees to get approved. This report talks about our recruitment efforts, our onboarding. One of the things that I was told the other day by one of our new staff members that we introduced earlier today was that our onboarding was like nothing they've ever seen before. They've never been welcomed to an organization like they have since they've started working here. So, our HR staff and our support staff in information services and finance, and we've really improved the way that we onboard staff, and that really does make a big difference to how long people are going to stay and recruitment and retention and whatnot. So I was pleased to hear that the work that's being done is actually translating into that message for new staff. We are working towards our goals of accessibility. We do have an accessibility plan. And one of the biggest things we've done this year, we've installed some accessible playgrounds. Engineering is always looking at the accessibility of our infrastructure for transportation. But this year we have a new website. It's been a year and a half in the making. We went live with it on April 1st, I believe. And again, when a member of the public comes up to me and says, whoever did your website did a phenomenal job because it's 10 times better than it ever was, or 100 times better than it ever was, that tells me that we're hitting the mark and doing something right when people are noticing. So a lot of work being done internally to make sure that our customer service is impeccable, that we can treat people fairly and within our values that council has established for us. And I think we do that very well. Under our strong community, so this is sort of where we look outwards to the community and translating some of that, some of the skills that we're learning internally and helping our community become a better, stronger community. We have a strategic objective to make our programming, support programming and support the community with things that they need. And I think our Parks, Recreation, and Culture Department this year have really stepped up and put some new programming in place, a lot of art-based programming, recreational programming that the community needs. I was on social media this morning before work and noticed that we have a Learn to Play Music program happening in July. You get a ukulele and you go to music camp for half a day, for a week long. And those types of programmings we never would have imagined having 5 or 10 years ago here. We sort of did our standard day camps and whatnot, but we've really expanded that programming at council's direction to be not just sports, not just recreation, but more arts-based and creative-based as well, because that's important for your community. Our tourism offerings have increased as well. There's a section here specifically on tourism later on in the report, but we've got some really great things happening in Burncoat and Fundy Tidal, and council is always very supportive of the tourism folks that are out on the 215, especially with grants and offerings for them. Council has also started planning for the future with respect to looking at Mount Uniac's recreation study that was done independent of the larger study that we're doing this year. In 2023, 2024, it was complete. And that really did give us some great information on what the folks in Mount Uniac are looking for from a recreation perspective. Council also, one of your objectives to have a strong community is to make sure that your emergency management folks are supported and that your police relationship is supported. So you have done that this year through a grant to the northern area for a training facility for the fire service. We also produced a few volunteer recruitment videos for the fire service, which if people haven't seen, you should really go look. They are amazing. And I think they sort of hit the nail on the head with what the volunteer fire service needs for just to develop some interest in what they do and to call people to action on volunteering with the fire service in any way that they can. You don't necessarily have to run into burning buildings. There's lots of things that the volunteer fire service needs support on from the community. So the other piece to this strong community is your investment in RCMP. So April 2023, you invested in 2 new RCMP officers. By April 1st, 2024, we've gone to a 24-hour policing model. And the 1 additional officer was added to get to your 28 officers in April 2024. So that really completes your transition from 23 to 28 officers and sets the RCMP up to be able to do some great community policing. This strong community piece really is around making sure that the community is accepting of others, it has places to do recreation, all of those things. So you just need to really look around at what's going on in East Hants, the support that you provide to your volunteers. East Hants has traditionally been a community where volunteers are doing a lot of the work through different organizations. You'll see later in the report that council has supported those organizations to the tune of about $1.6 million over the last year. So, the volunteers are making it happen, but there's certainly a lot of financial support from council to make that happen as well. When we look at economic prosperity, this year, of course, at the very start of this year, you approved your new 4-year economic development plan, which really drives that foundational work that the economic and business development folks are doing. But economic prosperity doesn't just sit with them, it sits with all of us. And that's been our mandate and our mantra for the last 20 years on economic development is, we're not just sitting around waiting for the economic and business development folks to bring us investment and business in East Hants. We all have to be part of that. And this key objective of making sure that we have that strong commercial and residential tax base belongs to all of us. So when we look at creating that 2050 vision, you're going to get a report in the next month or two, in September, because we don't meet in August, September, October, to sort of lay out for you what work has been done by various departments or what work needs to be done by various departments to plan for that East Hants 2050 vision. So a lot of that work is being done by planning, some by engineering. You've got finance folks who are weighing in on sort of those 10-year capital plans and whatnot. So that really is a exercise for all of us. And then when you look at the primary function of the East Hants official community plan, this year we finished up a plan review, an update, and a massive amount of work that has to go into a plan and update. You were all involved in it, so you know exactly how much work was involved. And really taking that, the northern area of East Hants and zoning it was an incredibly stressful process to go through, I think, from council's point of view. But you got it done, and now we have land use policies that can support that area's growth for the next however many years. So that one project was a massive project, but it had some really great work that was done during it, and it will actually set your community up quite well for the next, until the next full review in 2026, I believe. So this page also talks about the work that EBD does, our Economic Business Development staff does, for support of our current businesses that are here. We take great pride in the work that we do with businesses to help them either grow or retain them, help them with their needs through our business programs. And one of the biggest investments, and I thought it was worth noting in here, is the work that we did in Mount Uniacke this year. We had planned to expand the business park in Mount Uniacke, but instead we worked with Atlas Structural Systems to help them explore and evaluate building a fairly substantial building on Alicia Scott Drive in Mount Uniacke. So a huge win for Mount Uniacke, lots of new jobs, and really with the support of our EBD team to help make that happen. But also things like that takes the whole team. So, the engineering folks were pivotal in that, getting the information and I hate the word pivot, but pivoting from designing a new business park to working with a private investor to change up our plans. So, and again, council's participation in that was invaluable. So I'm going to get into, so those are our four sort of strategic pillars that we have. I want to get into a little bit of operations. What I will say is the version that councillors have on their desks, the water and wastewater numbers that you see on the infographics are off. We were missing from millions to billions, which is pretty important. So these on the screen are the right numbers. 1.3 billion liters of drinking water were produced and 2.7 billion liters of wastewater were treated. Pardon? Yeah. And again, the solid waste ones, it wasn't 1.9 tons, it's 1,900 tons. So just that'll be corrected on the online version of the report. This year, under the water, wastewater, there's lots going on in those systems. Obviously, there's a section dedicated to it. The critical information here is around our lead sampling program, just explaining to people that the program exists. We're always trying to find people who want to participate in that. This year too, under Waste Management Center, we kind of told a little bit more of a story around our solid waste. So trying to explain to people what happens at our Waste Management Center instead of just saying we process 1,900 tons of organics. Like, what happens to that organics? Where does it go? What does that mean to process 1,900 tons of organics? On the solid waste side as well, council's ramp cleanup program continues to blow my mind. How much waste and garbage is collected around those ramps onto the highways throughout East Hants. You know, again, we're at almost 2 tons of waste collected from around highway exchanges. So great way to support the local community, the volunteer groups who get paid to go out and pick those up. Puts about $6,000 into those hands, but it still astonishes me how much waste they end up picking up. And again, council has partnered with the Coat Foundation to recycle used coats, snow pants, jackets, those types of things. And we also still continue to have our community events, like our household hazardous waste event and the shred events, which have cars lined up around the block every time we offer them. So those are obviously providing a valuable service to the community. No surprise that we've had a significant amount of planning and development activity in East Hants. Not going to go through all the different stats here, but just to provide you with some information on what kind of activity we have had over the last year. Parks, Recreation, and Culture, again, council has seen most of these, but the public might not realize what's, what is taking place through the open space piece. So we do have 2.9 acres in Kiln Creek development that we'll use for future park development. We have open space in Mount Uniacke that's taking shape quite nicely. And we also have about $120,000 in contributed money towards your open space programs this year. And that will vary depending on the subdivisions that you get each year. And it will vary also depending on the size of the subdivisions that you get. And whether those subdivisions have parkland that is of interest to us. If they don't, then there would be the financial contribution. And I will say most of last summer, between all of our parks and walkways and whatnot, following the floods in July 2023, we did have a lot of work that was focused on repairing those walkways and whatnot and repairing washouts. So that was kind of derailed our summer plans for last year. The picture in the report is one that was taken from a helicopter of our dock floating down the Shuby River. We didn't know where it went, and when the person in the helicopter looked out the window, it was pretty obvious where it was. So
There's our dock.
there's our dock. So thankful to the farmers and the surrounding property owners who helped us reel it in and get it back into where it should be. Again, under recreation, I talked a lot about the programming that's been happening through Parks, Recreation, and Culture. Council's Playbox program has been expanded again this year. Phenomenal program to have toys in parks and playgrounds where children may not have the opportunity to have those things to play with. And all you have to do is walk by a playground and you can see that they're being well used. So kudos to council for that program. It's working really well. And again, more into the drama and Indigenous-led art classes and things like that that we've seen over the last year. I think our community is taking fairly well to all of those programs. And we've also introduced some free programming to help families get out and be active especially throughout the winter when folks tend to not be out as much and doing as much. So I think with the transition of the Sportsplex over to East Hants operations, I think you'll see more of that sort of skating into winter and things like that over the next year. And again, we can't talk about recreation in East Hants over the last year without talking about the impacts of the floods on our beloved aquatic center. As you know, and as everybody knows, the facility has been down for most of the year. And I can't speak enough about the work that staff have done to bring that facility back online. It is back online as of July 11th last week. So many people are so grateful to have it back, but I'm truly grateful for the work that Alana and her staff have done over the last year to bring that back online. It has been nothing short of a miracle with lead times and all of the different systems and the interconnectivity of them all. Without actually seeing them and talking to them on a regular basis about what's going on and what decisions have had to be made, you really can't explain what it's like to have to rebuild something like that, and to get it done within the year was phenomenal. So we also continue our work on community development. This year in particular, Council did some great work on the insurance grants for community groups. So Joe, our community coordinator, has been able to really help those folks. She also spends quite a bit of time just working with the groups. We've provided assistance to more than 25 groups this year who needed, some minor assistance right through to strategic planning and getting back on their feet kind of assistance. So again, kudos to staff for stepping up and helping those volunteer groups. We do have our volunteer awards. Folks are pictured in this report. And of course, our model volunteer, Doug Taylor, was recognized as the East Hants Model Volunteer for his 30-plus years of service to our community through various organizations. With our tourism, we continue to get 50,000 plus visitors a year to our tourism facilities. Our staff do tours out there. We have tourist buses that come from cruise ships. We have so many visitors and some great programs out there, as well as the support that Council provides to the artisans along the 215, some of the shops and whatnot. You also provide grants to the East Hants-owned tourism facilities out on the 215. So that really is working out really well. I think the growth in our tourism numbers is strong. And there's, on the page in front of you, there's a couple of things to point out. We've gotten quite a bit of exposure through the first two bullets, talk about some exposure we've gotten through the province, through some of their tourism programs. We, of course, for the first year, have gotten some funding from the federal government to protect our Atlantic mudpiddock. We have we call them our little mudpiddocks, but they're an endangered species that we've gotten some funding this year to protect those folks. And that really is an important part of, folks coming to Burnt Coat, educating them about the mudpiddock, making sure that they understand that they need to protect them and not go into certain areas and whatnot. Very helpful. And then we've been able to get some feedback through the province as well, through our Voice of the Visitor research program that the province is running, and we also operate a visitor center at Fundy Tidal, so that allows us to connect with our folks who are visiting the shore directly. Under emergency management, obviously we've had some significant events this past year. The flood was the most significant. We've had a few other instances other than the flood where we've called together our EMO folks, but certainly the flood damage and the aftermath of that, not just with the aquatic center, but with all of our systems, was significant. You'll see in some of the budget over expenditure reports that you'll get this month, in our wastewater and water, just the amount of chemicals we had to use extra, or the amount of power we had to use extra for pumping, it's tens of thousands of dollars just for those types of things. So the impact of the flooding was significant across our operations. We do have a request for emergency funding put through to the province, but you don't hear about those for a while. Again, this has some statistics on it, more for information purposes. Our building permits continue to be strong. The building permits are, I would say, the building permit number increases are not nearly as high as the value increases. So where you saw maybe a 20% increase in the number of building permits over the last, say, 3 years, there's a threefold increase in the amount those permits are related to. So things that we are building are much larger and much more expensive, which translates primarily into some of the larger multiplexes and whatnot that you're seeing. When we talk about the East Hants Fire Service, we talked about the volunteer support that council provided already. We also recognize our long service awards for firefighters, and we provide firefighting grants to the fire department. You've done some work on your fire grants over the last year. Last year, in support of the fire departments, we had $3.7 million in levies that were collected for those departments, and then another $264,000 in peripheral financial support, either through the training facility was the large portion of that, but council also pays for risk management for the fire departments, to have a risk manager that supports them, and then there's the operating grants that are paid to the departments who have less revenue through their assessments. So lots of support for the East Hants Fire Service. There is a message in here from the RCMP from Staff Sergeant Mike Balmaceda. Of note here, you know, PAC, the Police Advisory Committee, gets all of these statistics from the RCMP on a quarterly basis, and council through that committee has the ability to ask questions on that. Of course, the focus of the RCMP this year was on fighting crime, obviously, but also getting the community police officers out into the community, building relationships, and doing more of that community policing that really council has been looking for. The financial contribution to the RCMP this past year was $5.4 million. That's up from $4.7 million last year. The lion's share of that, of course, is the increase in officers, having 2 officers in place. And there was a 2.5% increase on the per officer cost on the other 25 officers that we have in place. So that's the operations side of things. The next section of the report is the treasurer's report. I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but I do want to take you through it just so folks at home mostly can understand, how this is put together. So,
CAO, there's a couple questions
Sure.
people have, so I think we'll break and we'll do the questions to the operations side, and then we'll move
Sure.
to the other one. So first up is Warden Rolls.
Just going back to that infrastructure and operations, water and wastewater page. So I tried to make the corrective notes in my paper copy when we were there, but I just want to make sure. So instead of where it said million in the paper copies, it should
you
have been
can change it to billion, yeah.
But on the screen, it says milliliters.
I think that's intended to be millions of liters,
Because it's
yeah.
was printed out here and we're changing it to billion, so I'm just,
Yeah.
that just doesn't look right.
We can change that.
Because the 1,000 was changed on here below, it just had 1.9 tons in our paper. It was just when I look at ML, I think milliliters.
We can change
So
that.
That was all, just a
Okay.
little, and make sure I understood right that it was billion liters, so.
Yep.
And with these, I don't know how many printed versions we have. Is it possible to just reprint the one page and insert it
I will
with
see
the
what we can do.
corrections? maybe not necessarily for us, we can make the notes, but sometimes people like to have copies to distribute or something. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden. Next up is Counselor Musa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A great report. Is there any way we could ask for something to be added to that in the future, like right now, or should be, like I know in 2016, we brought, late Councilor McDonald brought up a satellite remote like building for municipal building in Mount Uniac. And back then it wasn't feasible. Like I know the assessment was very low in Mount Uniac and we used to get like 2 building permit a year or 3. But now we're getting into 70s, 80s, and inspectors all the time over there. I think we should bring forward another report about that and look at it. I don't know about my fellow councilor, but I feel it's time, well, especially with the amount of road we're gonna take over, like in the near future too, that a satellite building should be looking at, especially if we get some bigger like recreational facility, we could integrate it into that too. So I don't know what you think about that.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if that's something that council wants us to look at and do a report, we'd need a motion of council to do that report. Yeah, I would leave it at that, I guess.
Okay.
We could look at that for either the next strategic plan, if that's something you want to have in the next strategic plan as a objective, or
Yeah, something to look at because the area is growing, everybody knows, and we're gonna have a lot to do up there. So for our staff, like for our inspector, I know I see inspectors all the time coming up and having lunch at my place. So I think they would have a better place to, if they have another office there and something between inspection, they could, if they have 2 inspections, they could stay at the office or something like that. So
Is that it, Counselor? Thank you. Next, Counselor Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 45, under animal control, it's showing only 11% of East End's dogs are registered. Is there anything we can do to get better compliance with that?
John can answer that.
That's a lot of animals that aren't being registered properly.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it is something we're aware of, and but when we look at other municipalities, it's not uncommon that it's that low. Ours is actually, the fact that you're in double digits, it's higher than many municipalities. And we have done things like you can get your tags now at veterinary clinics and so on, whereas previously you would always have to come here. We haven't increased the rate for dog tags in a long, long time. I guess the only other thing we could do is we would have to go to parks and where other people walk their dogs, and, you know, I guess we'd have to engage the SPCA to go out and find those people and give them a ticket. I think that's the only way you could increase.
Seems like a lot of dogs that are running loose as unregistered. Just a question that I was concerned.
Is that it, Counselor?
Yep, thanks.
Counselor Garden Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The way people look after their dogs these days, I mean, I think it's a vast improvement from years ago. So I honestly feel that a lot of it is just, they're just overlooking it. And I know that we talk about, you know, that you've advertised but I really think that if there was a way to ramp up the advertisement on social media or whatnot, that it would improve the percentage of dogs that get tagged. Yeah, I don't know what we're doing. Is it in our, is it a quarterly report that we put out, probably? That it's advertised for get your dog, registered? Anything on social, or on our Facebook page, like anything social media wise, if we could put a drive on it, I do think it would improve it. I'm not sure where we are advertising it right now, maybe.
So, I can answer that. So through you, Mr. Chairman, the dog tag advertisement goes out to every home in East Hants in the newsletter. So the back page is always the dog tag advertisement. We do social media posts about it.
Yeah.
I think, every time I see this number and I see the work that goes into issuing these dog tags and whatnot, we used to be the service to return your dog if they were lost.
Right.
So there was value in getting a dog tag because you could call and if we picked up the dog, we would send them back to the owner because we had their tag. Now you've got people whose dogs are lost, they go to Facebook and their dog's back in their home within an hour because the whole community is looking out
Right.
for it. And you also have microchips.
Right.
So, all you have to do is take a lost dog to a vet and they can tell you exactly where to send them home. And people can probably track them through their microchips, I'm not sure. So I think those are two factors that are influencing the sale of dog tags. And I guess we will continue to advertise them, but I think at some point council probably needs to take a look at whether it's a service you need to provide anymore. And that'll be something that, we're not going to do that on our own, but if we were directed to review the service and get some statistics together, maybe it's a service council doesn't want to offer anymore, especially where we don't do our own compliance and enforcement. That's done by the SPCA now. So food for thought, whether it's something that we continue to offer or not.
Right. I guess I never really put that much weight on the value as much as that you were just supposed to have your dog registered and that's just what you did. So, but yeah, maybe it's an antiquated service going forward. Not sure, but okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Warden Rolson.
Yeah, I was about to say very similar to what the CAO just said. I think part of the reason that people don't bother to register their dogs is that they don't see any value for it. They don't get anything for having their dogs registered, and I guess the only value really that I see in it at present is, and I guess we wouldn't have to have them registered, but our dog bylaw does give us some ability to handle dangerous dog complaints and things like that. So I do think there's still value there. But in the actual registration and requirement for dog tags, yeah, I'd certainly be open to a review to that because pretty near 90% of the dog owners don't do it anyway. And yeah, and I always registered my dog, but half the time she lost her tag when I had one before the year was out, and I'd come back and I'd pay a fee and I'd get another one. But so, yeah. Those are my comments. I would agree with what the CAO said as far as that goes. I wouldn't support getting rid of a dog bylaw, but I do wonder if they're, for all the money that we get and the effort it takes to do it and to administer it, I'm not sure that it's, as Councillor Garden-Cole said, it may be an antiquated system. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden. Councillor Runo. Working.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do. Tags were required. There was, in society, there was more dogs running it loose, chasing deer, so on and so forth. And I think that's why we come up with it at the time. Now, that's my own opinion. But I'm not against having a report, but, you talked about having veterinary clinics have dog tags now to sell them. I mean, I just registered mine, $6. Like, I mean, it's a mere pittance is what it is. But many of the people up and down the shore access services to a closer veterinary venue, which would be Colchester. So I'm pretty sure that you probably don't venture into the vets in Colchester. And so if a report was to be structured, could we look at, if we continue with the dog tagging process, could it be looked at that we go to maybe entertain a private venue for selling dog tags, i.e. Convenience stores, stores along there. That way, it would make it easier access, because a lot of people don't come over here. They don't. A lot of people in our area, Truro is their place of venue, and they very rarely go toward Elmsdale. So if it is convened that we have a report out, could you take those under consideration? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, of course. I mean, it doesn't have to be a veterinary clinic. And for a while, we had a pet food store that also sold tags. I can't remember, but we either have or have had somebody on the shore selling tags. I just can't remember off the top of my head who it is or if it's still active. But certainly we could entertain something like that, yeah.
If that is the case, I was unaware of that. And are they active now? Can you find that out?
Yeah.
Because those are the things that should be advertised.
Is that it, Counselor?
Yes.
Thank you. Warden Rolston.
I would move to recommend to council that staff be authorized to do a report on the value of continuing to register dogs.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. And the motion is passed unanimously. I'm just going to turn the chair over to the warden because I have a couple questions as well and a couple comments. First of all, I commend the Parks and Rec staff, as was highlighted by the CAO, about the play boxes. I know they were very well received throughout the municipality, and I know there was very shortly after, about a year after we started them, one of our neighboring municipalities came out with the exact same type of thing from what they experienced in coming to the parks in our area. So that's kudos to park staff. I do know they are well used. I have two very young children, and every time we go to the park, there's lots of kids. Sometimes all you see is sneakers hanging out the bottom of the top of the box as they're trying to reach things in the bottom. So it's very good. One of the things that I was thinking about, and it might even tie into the next side of the report, is just investment kind of by region or by district, because there's a lot of stuff when I look through the whole report and everything else, there's a lot of things that are broken down because there's lots of investment that has gone into, say, Burnt Coat, right, through our tourism stuff. And that's a lot of money going into the shore region, but it's not really captured under like the area. And just to kind of highlight the investment that I know we've all seen around the council chambers that have been going in the entire municipality. It's just sometimes it's hard to quantify it. If we had a graph or just some numbers to show where the money, whether it be, any type of investment in the community, whether it be tourism or infrastructure or anything else, showing that funds are going throughout the whole municipality and we are all growing together and we're all benefiting, I think would be something that might be good to show the residents in the future. And that's it for me. So seeing no other questions, CAO, continue on.
Mr. Chairman? So just taking you through the treasurer's report fairly high level. There is a message there from your treasurer, just talking about the work that's been done and the information. A lot of the information in the first few pages, I'm going to skip through fairly quickly. This comes directly from your budget that you set for 23-24. So all of you are very familiar with that information, but it does set the scene for the financial picture towards the end of the year. So we always put this information in our annual report, but it's really the budget piece on setting your tax rates and the CAP program and the impact that it has on there. It does have a D-transfer tax section on page 56 outlining the D-transfer tax and where that was collected from. And you've seen those numbers. Those are the final numbers, but they were the projections for the work that was done during the budget process for 24-25. So when you look at your consolidated reporting for the municipality, we have four major funds. You have your capital fund, which is where all of your investment in your infrastructure is recorded. You have your municipal operations, which is really what you folks are used to seeing and hearing us talk about throughout the year. We talk a lot about municipal operations. Under that, you have your general tax rate. We break it down by urban service rate. You have more area rates than that, but that's the biggest of your area rates. And then you have other area rates. So the report is broken down to look at those three pieces independently. And in your water utility, there's a page in here for water utility talking about your operating, your capital, and your reserve funds for the water utility. And then your reserve fund is broken down again between operating reserves, which can be used for operating or capital. You have capital reserves, which you're only allowed to use for capital purposes through your Municipal Government Act and your financial reporting obligations. And then you have obligatory reserves, which are money that you collect very specifically for specific things and set them aside. And those are primarily your water and wastewater infrastructure charges and your open space money that you bring in gets set into an obligatory reserve. So when you look at the consolidated financial statements for a municipality, all of those things are in there, in the numbers. And it's really almost impossible to break it down and to understand what's going on because the numbers are just so large. So what the next few pages will do is it will take you through those consolidated statements. And to be fair, it's probably not going to mean a whole lot to you at the consolidated level. When you get through into through the consolidated stuff, so it shows here, budget variance from budget to actual is 6.2 million. So that is, of course, not a number that you would be used to seeing in your general tax rate or in your operating budget. The breakdown for that is what the rest of the report kind of shows you. So when you look at on page 61, there's a table there that talks about your consolidated balance, where it ended. And then it points you to all the places where those numbers are going to be explained. So for example, your general operations variance, you showed a $2.1 million surplus this year in your general operations. But if you go to page 70 and 71, it shows you where that $2 million gets broken out. So about $1 million of that was a sort of a planned surplus. So council's policies where you budget for a certain percentage for benefits and whatnot, you plan to have a surplus. That's the numbers that you see in your June memo where you approved all those variances last month. Those are the numbers that make up about half of that. And the other $1 million would be what I would call a true surplus in your operations. So of your $43 million budget, you have a true surplus of about $1 million. And that money has been approved through council last month to set aside into your contingency reserve. So that $2 million is a big number to look at. Your transfers go on page 97. Would be your transfers. Let me think here. Your $1.6 million would be the transfers to the pension plan, your transfers to your professional fees, any projects carried forward from last year to this year, that money got transferred into reserve and you're pulling it back out in 24-25. And then your net gain on municipal assets, that would be sort of your sale of assets in the business park and whatnot. You do have some PSAB adjustments in your consolidated statements. And then, of course, you have a water utility variance. The big one in here, too, is your interest earned on capital reserves of $2.1 million. We talk about this number, but we don't actually budget for it. So in your capital fund, you don't have a budget in your capital fund per se. You have a capital budget. So this money is money that is not budgeted for. We certainly expect it. But on your capital fund, it gets allocated out to the different reserves that you have based on a proportion of their share. So that number always forms a large number in this report. So when you get out of the consolidated piece and you get into looking at the capital piece, this report on the next few pages has details on each capital project. But when you look at this capital fund page, just some overview, your general government number is things like you purchased a property on Lacey Ann this year, that would be under transportation. This is where your vehicles and your open space work would be done. Your environmental development, the 2.1 million, that's primarily purchasing your business park land this past year and any park development in that business park. The 5.3 million would be the wastewater treatment plant is the primary number there. That was about 4.8 million, but you also had a lot of work that you've been doing on your lift station pumps over the last number of years, and council has approved some pretty significant upgrades of individual pumps throughout your system. And then this is where we would have recorded the loader for the Waste Management Center this year. It was about just under 300,000 for a new loader out there. Your recreation and cultural stuff at 1.8 million. Primarily, that's your AT trail here on the 214, which we got some funding for that. And then about 300,000 was investments in playgrounds and parks throughout the municipality. So a couple up on the shore, one on John Murray Drive, and then other playground lands and whatnot. And then, of course, your water utility, the primary chunk of that 5.5 million was the upgrade to the tank and the land that was purchased for water utility functions in the future. And then, of course, we had a water tower, was about $600,000 for renewal. That project is just wrapping up now. And we're spending now about $100,000 a year on meters for the water utility. So those are all capitalized as well. Even though they're small, we capitalize them in chunks. So the next few pages, I'm not going to go over in detail. You're all very aware through the strategic section of the plan that these capital projects happened. This sort of gives you the financial picture around them in the treasurer's side. Again, I've spoken about all of these. And then we get into, so that's your capital fund, your operating fund. There's some sort of graphs of where the money was spent. And in the bottom left-hand corner, we look at the actual surplus that we have for the year in three different chunks. We look at the surplus for operations, the surplus for the urban service rate, and then for other lights, primarily for area rates, area rate lights. The next page sort of describes those, the $2 million surplus, where the transfers went and whatnot. I don't think there's too many surprises in here for council. You know, one of the big wins this year was an increase in our tipping fees and scrap metal and RFP diversion funds. There is a recorded loss for the Sportsplex in here of about $95,000. That would include us granting the Arena Association a grant of $60,000, so it would have been significantly more than that. In your operations side, which is really the left-hand side of the page that you're looking at on the screen, a lot of those things, you know, wages would be for positions that weren't filled throughout the year. That number is usually quite significant, but as I mentioned this morning, we've been doing a great job of recruitment and retention, so that's fairly small considering for this year. And we also have in these numbers the impact of the East Hants Aquatic Center and sort of the loss of revenue, but also the loss of operating expenses there. So all of that contributes into the surplus of your $2 million. Of course, I didn't mention the D-transfer tax, which is the $1.4 million. You folks have talked about that throughout your budget process, so that would be the lion's share of it. And then on the right-hand side of the page is where those transfers come into play. So your transfer to reserves for the surplus, but then, you know, the Sportsplex motion, the hospital balloon payment motion, all of the transfers that you approved in June, and of course that paying towards the East Hants Arena deficit. So that's where the money sort of gets distributed for your general operations. We also put in here a table for municipal transfers just to demonstrate for folks how much the municipality actually transfers directly from our budget out for education and other provincial services. The urban service rate page is here. As I mentioned earlier, there was quite a significant expense to the services, both water and wastewater, due to the flood, so you'll see those. There is a surplus at year end for the urban service rate of $49,000. And we also have in this report annually how much in reserves we have for the urban service reserves. When you look at that, for the urban service, 4.7 million, it looks like a lot, but it's not at all a lot of money compared to the capital budgets that those services have. For example, if you look at the sidewalk budgets for this year alone, you're into the millions of dollars and you've got 1.5 million in your reserves. So as much as we've been putting into those reserves, we're taking from them as well fairly quickly. East Hants Water Utility had a deficit this year of $206,000. Not great news, but the projected deficit was $620,000. So in the grand scheme of things, it's better news than not. But we still do need to look at a rate review, which we've committed to the URB to start by the end of this fiscal year. So you'll be into next fiscal year. You'll have the new council that will have to deal with a rate review to make sure that your rates are keeping up with your expenditures. We haven't had new rates set for the water utility since 2017, so we're certainly due to update those. We talk a little bit about your reserves in the report, just the importance of them, what they're used for, how much is set aside, and the breakdown for your reserves. There's a specific breakdown on page 127 in the financial statements to show you where your reserves are all sitting in particular. This is sort of a summary of your capital and your obligatory reserves. And as I mentioned, there's some things that the Municipal Government Act requires you to put into capital reserves. You don't have a choice to do that. The report also outlines the financial condition indicators. This is a system that the province put in place a number of years ago when they were looking at the financial viability of municipalities and the sustainability of those municipalities. We have historically done very well on our fiscal indicators. One that we've looked at for debt servicing, keep in mind that we as a rural municipality live by the rural indicators. So that's kind of why we fall out of line on the debt, for example, because there's not a lot of rural municipalities that are have the infrastructure investment that East Hants has, and that comes along with borrowing. So it's not something even at a yellow, which indicates that you're slightly above the recommended threshold. It's not something that we are concerned with. It's not something that the minister is concerned with. It's just an indicator for their overall. Some municipalities, you'll look at this and most of their dots are red. Those are the folks that the Department of Municipal Affairs and Housing are paying close attention to. The 3-year change in tax base is a new one for us to be yellow. We are talking with the department about reviewing that indicator because it's an indicator that measures the growth of your assessment base compared to CPI. But it's flawed. There is some flaws in there because they're not actually measuring the same 2 periods. So we're looking at that with the Department of Municipal Affairs and Housing, but at 10.2%, I think the change in the assessment rate or in the CPI that they look at is 18%. So that indicates that East Hants' assessment isn't keeping up with growth, which is quite ridiculous because if anybody is not keeping up with growth, it's us. We're sort of the envy of assessment growth across the province. So we're going to do some work on that and hopefully get that back into a green situation by next year. So the next few pages just describe those indicators. So there's a description of each one and why we are where we are. This information is also on the provincial website, and it's also linked on our website. with a caveat that this information is not for the year that this treasurer's report is for. The province is sort of a year behind, or 2 years behind at the moment. So this information is comparing 2021 to 2022 and not the 2023, 2024 numbers that are in the rest of the report. So just keep that in mind as you look at them. The next few pages outline the investment that council has made in our community through municipal grants. You'll see there's tourism grants, beautification grants, the charitable tax exemptions that you give to organizations throughout East Hants. We do have community partnership grants, district recreation, bursaries, EMO grants, fire grants. You know, the list goes on. But they are all outlined, and the total grant given to the community is $1.6 million. Now, a couple of $100,000 of that is for the water utility assets where you've exempted their taxes, but for all intents and purposes, you're 1.4 million-ish to the community for community investment. And this part I'm not going to go over. These are the consolidated financial statements. You have approved these from Deloitte last month. They are included in the report for anyone who wishes to dive deep into those numbers. And I'm sure our fantastic finance staff would answer any questions you have on them. But they are consolidated and I'll say don't make much sense to most people who are reading them. So, but there's lots of information in the financial statements, in the notes, that breaks it down as well and breaks down some of the operating statements and whatnot are broken down throughout the notes, but I think with the treasurer's report, that sort of gives most people what they need for the annual report. So, Mr. Chairman, that is the annual report. Again, I can't thank council enough for the support they've given staff over the last year to be able to execute on the strategic plan. This report, I think, is proof of that. And I also can't thank our staff enough for the work that they do every day for the community and making sure that they always have that vision in mind and council's strategic vision and the plan behind them, supporting them in what they do. So if you have any questions, we can open the floor.
And I first want to say, yes, it's a very detailed report, and the quality of these reports the last number of years have continually gotten better and easier to read and more open for the public to understand. So first up for questions is Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, going back to page 54, I waited patiently. I'm looking at where it says number of taxable properties. I'm looking at the dates 2020 to 2022. There was a decrease of 32 properties, and I'm just curious to see how that happens or what causes that. Number of taxable properties, the first line. 2020 to 2021, 14,882, and the next year it goes down to 14,854, and I'm just curious what the gap is caused.
I don't know specifically in that year, but I believe there was a consolidation of a number of properties that year in the northern region of, I can't remember exactly who it was, but the only way you would get that is if you had consolidation of properties. So you'd have to have the growth of new properties that are subdivided offset by a number of properties that were consolidated.
Okay.
We can go back to the annual report from that year and it would explain that to us. We can get back to you on that.
Okay. Just curious, that's all, looking through the numbers. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else have any questions on the report? Seeing none, CAO, thank you for the report.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would look for a motion to recommend to council that this report get approved as the 2023-2024 annual report.
Yes, and there was one other point that I wanted to ask. Once this report where the errors get amended,
Yep.
I was wondering if we could send a couple copies to each of the libraries located in East
Yes.
Hants,
Yep.
so they'll have them on hand.
Yep.
Okay.
And if any of your folks want a version, a printed copy of the report, we can make those available as well. Just let my staff and communications know and we'll get you a copy. We have a couple that we send out every year to some residents who want a copy every year, but other than those, we'll take requests, no problem. It will be available online for anyone who has access online.
All right. Warden Rolston.
Yes, I just move the adoption of the annual report.
Moved and seconded. On before the motion, Counselor Mitchell.
I'd like to have a copy of the Elmsford Fire Department. And then before moves, it's a pleasure.
Sure.
There we go. See no further discussion? Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. And the motion is passed by everybody in the room. Unanimously by everybody in the room. Okay, our next item on the agenda is an in-camera contractual issue. So I will be looking for a motion to go into camera. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Contrary? We will wait as we move into camera. I'd like to report, we met in camera to discuss a contractual issue. There are no motions coming forward as a result of that discussion at this time. So for a housekeeping item, we're looking to move Infrastructure and Operations Committee to the end of the day following Planning and Advisory Committee. All those in favor? Contrary? Okay, we will now move that to the end of the day. As it is time to adjourn for lunch, I'll be looking for a motion to adjourn for lunch to reconvene at 1:30 in Planning and Advisory Committee with Councillor Mitchell.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary mind? We are adjourned. See you at